Hello, my name is Rinon and welcome to my guide for another Sil'dih? Subterranean. This guide will give you all the information you need to clear both the base difficulty of the content and the enhanced savage difficulty. This dungeon contains 3 bosses and 2 trash mob zones. The trash mob zones actually somewhat matter as they have simple mechanics but hit tremendously hard, especially in Savage. You need to know what to expect or your run can end quickly in pain. One final thing to note is that mechanically Savage and Normal of this dungeon are identical, so this guide works for both versions. What changes between the 2 difficulties are the appearance or lack thereof of certain AoE indicators, mobs will do much more damage, and the bosses have more HP leading to tighter enrages. There is also in Savage an overall enrage from the moment you pull the first mob until the moment the final boss dies. This final video covers the final boss encounter in the instance, which I believe is the one which will give players the most issue when progressing. Let's get into it. Shadowcaster Zeless opens up with Show of Strength, which is a ray damage on the party. His Infern brand will then signify the start of the next mechanic. Immediately have the party split into 2. Tank and melee go north, healer and ranged go south. 4 balls of fire will spawn and they will shortly begin showing rotation marks. On top of this you will see staves linked to them which signify that shortly they will begin teleporting and swapping positions. The rotations will happen first and then the teleportations. Your goal is to find the safe spaces on your half of the arena and to spread within that safe position with the other player on your half. The boss will then jump on the 2 furthest players, giving them a vulnerability up. These images here should give you a good understanding of the numerous rotational patterns, but one rule of thumb I use while spreading is that the closest that 2 players can and should be to one another is on opposite diagonal edges of a square. Any closer will likely lead to disaster. You should get a feel for each pattern within a few pulls and they'll likely feel much more comfortable to read from that point onwards. At this point 2 players should have a vuln up as Blessed Beacon begins to cast. The 2 players that have not been hit will need to block line AoEs from the boss, targeting those vuln up players so that they are not immediately killed. Make sure that these new blocker and blockee pairs are spread from one another so as to not overlap AoEs. This is followed by a heavy tank buster called Fire, Steel, Fracture. When the next Infern brand casts, 8 guitar strings as my group calls them will spawn. 4 blue with a number of 1, 2, 3 and 4, and 4 red with a number of 1, 2, 3 and 4. The strings will be in a plus shaped pattern with 4 going from north to south and 4 going from east to west. Additionally, on the outside of the arena a number of flame squares will spawn and cover roughly 3/4 of one of the walls. Pay attention to whether they spawned on a side wall or on a north wall. Lastly, each player will receive a debuff with a number between 1 and 4. Resolving this mechanic is actually fairly simple. When your debuff hits 0, it will change from a brand to a flame. Once it becomes a flame, you can stand on a guitar string of your corresponding number to erase it. The group's initial goal is to erase the 4 strings that are in line with the flame squares that just spawned. So in the case where flame squares spawned on the west wall, you will want to cut the strings going from west to east to allow your group free access to moving up and down that west wall. One additional thing to bear in mind for pre-positioning is that you cannot walk through strings, so you must stand at the intercardinal that allows you access to both of your guitar strings without needing to run through a number higher than yours. As you're cutting the first 4 strings in order, more flame cards will appear on the wall which was not initially covered, and after the first 4 strings are cut, pizza slice AoEs will channel from the boss. Move to the safe part of the room from the first flame squares with your newfound arena space, and then dodge the pizza slices. After that you can begin to cut the second set of guitar strings once again in order. Once the final 4 strings are cut, you can move to the safe part of the arena for the final flame square detonation. At the end of this mechanic, another tank buster will also cast, alongside array damage. The next Infern brand will spawn a rotating teleporter in each corner of the room. 4 staffs will also spawn in fixed locations on the arena, and on the banishment cast, each player will also receive rotating teleport marker on themselves. 2 of those staffs will begin telegraphing a spinning blue light. This signifies that they will need to be resolved first. It will either be the 2 inner or the 2 outer staffs that show this first. When the staffs execute, they will cleave the 2 closest players. If a player is hit by 2 cleaves at once, they die. So each player needs to take 1 cleave from the first set of staffs and 1 cleave from the second set of staffs. To add further complication, you can't just stand next to a staff, you instead need to be teleported there by the moving teleporters at the back and then be positioned in such a way that the teleport tied to you will then allow you to move for the second set. It all sounds very complicated, and honestly it is a fairly complex mechanic. It took us a little while to solve, so I recommend this strat to ease the load on players. Place your markers much like in this diagram and clip to give you more of a reference of exactly where to stand to make this even easier. If your arrows are orange, you go north. If your arrows are blue, you go south. Look to the 2 rotating teleporters on your edge of the arena. Find the one which is going to rotate inside the room rather than off the edge of the arena, and have 1 player stand on that while the other player stands a little bit ahead in the location where the rotating beam should end after it finishes its rotation. There are actually little markings on the floor that can help make this position really clear so you don't have to use any kind of feely craft. Then, when the teleport occurs, the players will swap sides. Each will stand on the safe marker they have access to, and the beams will cleave them safely without hitting any other players. Doing it this way removes a number of thought processes, and I honestly think it makes this mechanic way more puggable. You then get teleported by your own teleport beams, you go stand back on the markers, and the mechanic executes. This mechanic is followed up by another Tank Buster and another Infern brand. This brand will spawn 3 fire cards, each with a rotating teleporter attached to them. One thing that could overcomplicate this mechanic in your head that I want to iron out now is that the cards do not rotate, they just move. It is only the teleport locations that rotate, the cards themselves just move but without any rotation. The first thing you want to do here is check if the middle column is safe or unsafe. You can do this before the rotators even appear by checking the facing of the middle square. If it faces north, middle is unsafe. There will always be 1 unsafe column and 2 unsafe rows, rendering 4 squares in total safe for players. You find the 4 safe squares and spread amongst them with 1 player going on each square, as the boss is going to once again jump on 2 players furthest away from it and give them vuln-ups just like at the start of the encounter. These images might help you visualize how to discern the safe rows, but do bear in mind the column has been specifically left off of these images to give more visual clarity, so there will only be 4 safe squares in the end, not 6 like it often shows here. Another 2 block beams will happen after this, as well as a raid damage. The last major mechanic of the encounter will begin now, spawning the guitar strings you've seen before, as well as 4 of the cleaving staves from one of the previous mechanics. This one is actually all about time management, and it isn't very complex at all, it just looks it. The players marked with 1 and 2 move into the middle of the arena, and the players marked with 3 and 4 will go to the first blue flashing staff in order to bait the cleaves away from those middle players. As soon as they are able, 1 and 2 break strings to open up a path to players 3 and 4. After their cleave, players 3 and 4 will then run through the newly opened path and open their 3 and 4 strings to allow access to the opposite staff, which should now be spinning blue as well. After this, they move back into their initial position. 1 and 2 can then safely walk through and bait this staff away from players. AoEs will then spawn underneath each player and they can move to the free space in the center of the arena. Then you're going to repeat. 1 and 2 will break strings, 3 and 4 will bait cleaves, then 3 and 4 will break strings, so 1 and 2 can bait cleaves. You'll need to dodge some more pizza slices during this mechanic, but just don't panic and you'll have no trouble overcoming it. This phase is followed up by a final tank buster and raid damage before finally entering an enrage cast. I really hope that this video helped you overcome your Arse or Arse Savage prog, and if you've cleared Savage, Enjoy your free Materia 10. Thank you so much for watching, friends, and for those of you still progressing, I wish you the best of luck. Have a fantastic rest of your day.